As Tim has mentioned, the next object we're going to look at is an atlas of down survey maps. These were originally made by Sir William Petty following the Cromwellian conquest of Ireland in the 1650s. The set we have in PRONI is one of only 2 examples out of many, many thousands of maps that were originally made that are certified copies from the Public Record Office or its predecessor, the Record Tower in Dublin Castle. There's this one set from Antrim, which contains approximately 30 maps, and another set in Sligo County Library that contains a similar number. So although there are thousands and thousands of survivors, these are very, very rare. Most of the northern half of County Antrim was mapped by petty surveyors. The idea was that following the Cromwellian conquest, all of land that was owned by either people who supported the Irish Rebellion of 1641 or people who supported Charles I in the decade of civil war that followed would have their lands confiscated. The Earl of Antrim, who was a Catholic landowner, owned the northern half of County Antrim, so petty surveyors were sent out to find out what he had, survey the lands, map it all out, and give it to people who had entered a lottery to receive it. The down survey was organised by county, then by barony, and then by parish. So a map was made of each barony, and then separate maps were made of every single parish. The total set we approximate came to around 2,500 maps. The original maps for County Antrim, most of them were destroyed in 1711 in an earlier fire that happened in Dublin Castle. The final set of maps was destroyed in 1922. So what we're not looking at here is an original, we're looking at a copy, but it's a certified copy, so it is as close as can be to the original map. It was made by William Molesworth, the Surveyor General of Ireland, in about the 1720s, following the death of the third Earl, where again they wanted to re-establish what his estate comprised. It is a striking example of early modern cartography. It's very, very heavily illustrated. For people who know the island of Rathlin, the first thing that strikes you is that the map is actually upside down. In those days, it wasn't normal to orientate all maps to the north like we do now. Most of them were orientated to the east, which is where the expression orientation came from. Why this map is orientated to the south, we don't know. It may well be that the surveyor simply preferred it that way. The surveyor's name was William Carcass, who did quite a few of these maps around the country. Compared with other down survey maps, the map of Rathlin is actually quite sparse. It has very little detail and very brief descriptions of the land. It just says arable or pasture. And one of the reasons for this is because Rathlin was used as a staging post for Scottish soldiers who were being sent to Ireland to fight in the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. And by local accounts, after they had left, there wasn't a blade of grass left on the island. So the island was almost entirely stripped bare during the 1640s. So by the time the maps came to be made in the 1650s, it was effectively barren apart from a couple of destroyed castles. However attractive they are, the maps are really about confiscation. The landowner had to prove his innocence under the Cromwellian regime. The Cromwellians did not have to prove that he had been guilty of rebelling against the king, because Randall MacDonald actually didn't rebel against the king. He was not a friend of the parliamentarians. Randall MacDonald was lucky in a way in that he was hopeless with money. So in 1637 he'd actually mortgaged his entire estate to a powerful group of Puritan merchants in London, and they passed this mortgage from one to the other over a period of about 20 years. Very much in the same way as mortgages were sold off by banks here in the early part of the 21st century. The mortgage became of increasingly less value as it became less likely that MacDonald would ever actually be able to redeem it. But it eventually fell into the hands of a very powerful financier by the name of Sir Martin Noel. So Martin Noel reckoned he would get his hands on the northern half of the Antrim estate. So it basically protected it in a way from confiscation. Because Noel was a very, very powerful person in London, Nobody really wanted to get into an argument with them about, well, I've just been given this land, so you have to give it to me. It wasn't going to happen. Noel is better known as a founder of the Royal Africa Company. He had his hands in lots and lots of pies. He owned land in Barbados. He owned shipping all over the place. He had farmed all the taxes for Ireland in the late 1650s. That means that whatever taxes the state was hoping to receive in a year, Noel would pay them an estimate and keep the profits. So he was a very, very important person. What he has in common actually with William Molesworth is that Noel was involved in the shipping of Scots and Irish captives from Coleraine in the 1650s during the Cromwellian regime. And Molesworth's grandfather, Robert Molesworth, was doing the same thing in Dublin. He was a merchant who got involved in this shipping of captives and selling them in Barbados. So they have something in common. And we find that Irish history and Irish records are full of these little interconnections that you find. But there is, overall, there's a paradox to these maps. They are very attractive. Some of them are actually quite beautiful, but they really tell a very sad story. They tell a story of confiscation and a story of loss. The fact that the maps themselves, these maps of Antrim, were lost twice, once in 1711 and once again in 1922. We're just fortunate that we still have these survivors so we can see how people depicted their own world.